Well, hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Long Box Punk. That's me. I'm Chris. I am the punk, and I am joined on this episode by Carmen. Carmen, thanks so much for hanging out with me and talking indie comics and just getting to crack into the indie comic scene with you on this episode. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me.
For sure. So we're going to get into the Audacity. We're going to talk sci-fi. We might even talk Star Trek. But before we get there, I'm curious, like, what's your origin story? How did you get into comics? How did you start writing? And then, like, what led us to the Audacity now being successfully funded on Kickstarter here in February of 2025?
All right. It all started with the toxic goo. The
Perfect.
toxic goo in this case was my animation degree.
Okay.
I went to SCAD for an animation degree in 2013. And it was toxic goo-esque, I would say.
Sure.
There were really good parts. And then there were parts that just, I didn't want to be an animator. Animating is a horrible, horrible thing for a person to do to themselves. It just takes so long. I already had tendinitis right out of high school.
Oh, no.
And it did not make it any better doing animation. Yeah. And I found I had my own stories to tell. I didn't want to tell other people's stories. And as a beginning animator, and even as an experienced animator, you can be 20 years down the line, you're still telling other people's stories.
Yeah.
So I got my degree, and then I ended up not using it at all.
Yep.
I opened a business, Cosmic Corner, in the meantime to make money. And that's where I am right now. And then while I was getting that business started, I was also writing as a hobby, just for fun. I didn't have friends. Didn't have time. So I'd had this story that I wanted to write even before I went to animation school, because I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and I loved it. I grew up on Star Trek. I was just really interested in sci-fi and storytelling in general. And I was dissatisfied with some parts of Hitchhiker's Guide. It replaced the Holy Bible on my nightstand for many years because I saw so much potential in it, just like the Bible. I wanted it to be this certain thing that it wasn't, just like the Bible. And then I realized I can make it what I want it to be. So when I sat down to write, I could add gay characters to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I could add a plot that made sense to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So that's what I did.
Nice.
I made my own thing out of that, out of my dissatisfaction. And so I wrote the first book about the time I was graduating, published that. And then I published it with a cover, and I unfortunately didn't bring it with me. But the cover has an illustration of May and Zan, the main characters. And because I'm an animator, it was a very comic book style illustration. So when I would go sell it, people would say, "Oh, is this a graphic novel?" All the time. I got that comment constantly. And I'd have to explain, no, it's not, but I'm an animator, so this is how I think.
Yeah.
And eventually one day I realized, well, why is it not a graphic novel? So I sat down and I started teaching myself how to do comics, because though it's similar to animation, there's a lot of differences. And I didn't actually grow up reading comics. I am not a comic person. I was an animation person, but comics are way easier to do as an individual. So I learned how to do that.
That's interesting.
Here we are.
So you kind of ended up in comics because people kept asking if it was a comic.
Yes.
Like, was that where the idea of, like, you know what? Maybe I could make this a comic.
Yeah.
Like,
I was just tired of people asking if it was a comic.
That's awesome. So, okay. And that was just with the first novel, right? And you've got 4 that
Yeah.
are currently available?
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote the 4 novels in the series. It took me about 3 years to write each novel, and it's taken me 4 years to finish the comic book based on the first novel.
Okay,
Hopefully, I've
perfect.
gone a little faster since then. Hopefully,
Yeah,
I can get the second book out quicker than that, but we'll see.
I saw on the Kickstarter campaign, which congrats on like the fully funding on that. That's always an exciting thing to like not glaze over. And I love how you were like, yeah, you know, I like wrote the novel and published that and whatever. Like, how did you made it feel just so like, yeah, it's just a thing that like everybody does, right? Like I would have no idea where to start if I wanted to like write a novel and publish it. Like how just talking about the novel piece of it first,
Mm.
like how did as you were writing it and then like did you just start googling like how do I publish a novel? Because I feel like that's where I would start.
Well, the first step of publishing a novel is writing a novel. So
Got it.
that's where I
Okay.
started. I
Okay,
wrote it.
that's a
And as I was writing it, I did research how other people had done it. NaNoWriMo, which is now kind of a dirty word, unfortunately. I don't know if you've heard about it.
no.
It's in the writer community. It's a whole thing that we do not need to
Okay.
get into. But
Awesome.
it was a program that helped a lot of people get inspired, including me, inspired to write a novel, and also had a lot of resources about how to self-publish, how to self-edit, how to find a cheap editor if you needed an editor, which you do. You do need an editor.
Yeah.
I did get an editor. um, it had all the resources I need. So I'm really grateful to that company. Lately, they've had some bad press because they made some really, really bad decisions
Ah,
regarding like forum safety and AI ideas that were not so hot.
got it.
But I still am grateful to what they brought me. And that was mainly that support system was what helped me do it.
Okay. And then did you continue using that same edit? Like, was it easy for you to find an editor?
Yeah, I met my editor, Charlie Knight, on Twitter, back when Twitter was fun,
Yep. I
when
remember
it
those days.
existed,
Yep.
in the writing community on Twitter. And they would just post in the writing community about their services. They're a really cool person, and their rates were really good. So yeah, I still
That
use them as
helps.
my main editor.
That's cool. And
Mhm.
speaking of like social media stuff, and see, here I go. So, meeting somebody through Twitter to then work with is like, it's crazy to me when I ask people, like, well, how did you find, because you did art and all the writing and stuff for the Audacity, when there are two people that are doing those pieces. Um, a lot of people are like, yeah, I just like posted on social media, like, hey, looking for this. And then I got replies and then I looked at the replies and figured out who I wanted to work with. Like, to me, that whole idea, I guess because I haven't really gotten far into any of that, is like that feels like that takes a huge step of courage to like reach out and just put yourself out there like, hey, I'm making a thing, but like I need help. Like, was that hard for you to do? Did you find, or were you just kind of like, that's the next step, so that's what I'm doing?
I don't think I did that very well, actually. I did like you said, I did all the writing and I did all the art, and I got a book that teaches you how to do like comic bubbles. I learned how to do that myself.
Okay.
I need the control. I'm a control freak.
Yeah. No, I
Um
get that. I get that.
but I did also, so it was hard at first for me to relinquish any control at all. But I knew I needed another pair of eyes on this because, there's going to be typos, there's going to be grammatical errors, there's going to be sentences that make sense to my brain, but don't make sense to most people's brains because my brain is different.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like all of us have different brains. So you need beta readers. You need lots of people who read your book because they'll all point out a different thing and be like, what is this? Like, you don't know
Mm,
what this is. And But then you have to kind of, because for me, my artistry and my artistic license was like way up here. It had to be all my ideas.
Yeah.
But then there's also readability.
Yeah.
And I had to translate certain things that were in my brain into a way that the majority, not the majority necessarily, but like a decent number of people could understand.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw my getting an editor as.
Okay.
It was essentially like, I just need to make sure that I'm being understood well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that is super helpful. And I feel like editors, a lot of times, both novel and like comic book graphic novels too, like the editors are the unsung heroes that keep not just like typos from occurring, but also just like the overarching themes making sense and continuity happening. Like, what was the process like working with that editor? See, this is where I'm like tweaking my like normal questions, because having done like everything yourself, I don't even understand how you can do both pieces, because I can't draw yet. I've set out a quest, I guess, this year to like learn how to draw, but as of right now, like I can't draw my way out of a paper bag. So like, how, when you were writing and like adapting the novel into a comic book, like did you find yourself tweaking some of the story to like play towards your strengths as you were drawing it, or did you stay pretty true to the novel?
I The story mostly stays true to the novel because I did the comic book about 4, 5, how old am I now? Oh my goodness, several years later. I am a better writer than I was, when I published the first novel in 2017. And I did go back and tweak some things in the novel and do a republish of it with Space Wizard Books. Shout out to them, they are amazing. So I did tweak so the novel came, and then I rewrote parts of it for the comic, and then I
Mhm.
rewrote the novel to match the comic more
Okay.
for the re-release with Space
Yeah.
Wizard. But as far as playing to my strengths, I um, I don't know that I have any strengths when it comes to drawing.
Okay.
Um, So I didn't really bother trying to do that. But what I did do was I'm very conscious of humor theory, which sounds so boring and terrible.
No, I love how that sounds. Let's dig into that more.
So I studied, like, Futurama was also one of my favorite shows as a kid. And I'm such a nerd that what I would do is I would watch the show, and then I would think, how would I like pick out some of my favorite jokes, especially because there's a lot of visual humor in Futurama.
Yeah.
So I would say, how would I write that joke and make it just as funny without the visuals?
Okay.
So I have a lot of experience just from being a nerd, with translating visual humor into prose humor, which means that I also could translate prose humor back into visual humor, which I did
Okay.
a lot of, because there's a lot of prose humor that doesn't work visually in the books.
Yeah.
So I had to add a lot of extra visual humor that doesn't work as prose into the comics.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fascinating thing to like approach and try and tackle, because you're absolutely right. Like there's completely different, but like, so I used to have my last year like wall calendar. Not that I ever wrote anything down, it was just because I had jokes on it, but like every day had a new pun because I love puns. I think it's the height of comedy. Right above slapstick like physical humor,
Mhm,
but I like some puns only work in print because of the wordplay that's involved, or
mhm,
like the spellings and things like that that don't work if you say it out loud. And then similarly, now I've got it's the Argyle comic like daily desk calendar thing, and
mhm,
some of those little, like it's a single panel cartoon that is funny sometimes because of what it looks like and not because of the words that are being exchanged. But it, like, there's a definite difference in those styles of comedy that I can imagine would be very difficult. Like today's Argyle thing was about Bavarian cancer instead of ovarian cancer. And like the little like cancer thing has on like the hat and the lederhosen, and the doc's like, I think I'm reading this right. But to like explain that, it's like, you're doing what? Like, what's the joke? And it just doesn't, I don't think it plays at all, especially me poorly trying to explain it. But like that, transforming that has to be a really good, I think, muscle to have,
Mhm.
especially when you're writing a lot of humor. Because even stuff with like the character cards that you have on your website, which is linked in the description below, um, are like super fun to read because of just the little like one-liner explainers for each character that you've got. And it already gives this feel of like, this is a fun comedic, like this is probably a really funny story. So even reading just those character cards, I was like, this is going to be a really fun conversation, because it seems like you just have comedy like flowing completely through you and coming out in like everything you do. Is that like, am I completely pulling that out of left field?
No, I think if sometimes there are days, the good days, and I feel like it's just like this big universal plug and like right into the top of my head, and it's just like,
Yeah,
I am a god of humor, and it just flows through. That's not every day. There are some
sure.
days where I'm writing very different things, where I'm just editing. But yeah, usually, and in fact, I find that the more serious something is, the more that that switch gets turned on, and I'm like, I have to make a joke about this.
Yeah.
So we're watching, this is terrible. So my other passion is yoga and Hinduism, and like a huge passion for me. So we were watching, my husband and I, Gandhi,
Okay.
that 1980s documentary film. Very serious, very, very good.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. Very serious, very powerful, very emotional. I was feeling a lot. I was thinking a lot. I was enjoying it. I was constantly making jokes. It was terrible. Sometimes at the most inappropriate time, I
Hmm.
I would think of a joke
Yeah.
because, my dad is a, hospice worker. Both my parents are hospice workers, so I grew up around, death and dying and very
Yeah.
serious work. But my dad's also a clown. He's a hospice clown.
Okay.
So he would always talk about lightening up with laughter. And he's a bereavement counselor. So one of his things was, how do I make these people laugh so that they can, because there's tension, the tension's really high. How do
Yeah.
I help them process this by releasing some of that steam through laughter? So that was really like buried in my psyche. Like my dad just chiseled that into me. So it comes
Yeah.
out.
That's awesome. I just got chills as you were saying that, because Robin Williams for me growing up and even now is as like forever and will always be my favorite actor. And things like Patch Adams, and like the lady in the pool of noodles, right? Like those moments of just pure like unadulterated joy in the midst of like really terrible diagnoses or whatever. Like those are so critical, because you have to have that release. And to like, I think to be a human, like you can't just not experience all of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But I just got like chills as you were saying that, thinking about Robin Williams, and also like talking about Gandhi. He had a joke about Gandhi where like, what if Gandhi was a fashion designer and he released jeans that were only in size like 1 and below? And he does this whole like so as soon as you said Gandhi, I was like, Gandhi jeans size 1 and below. And I just like, it's just burnt into my brain that that's my response. So I'm glad that we're
Yeah.
on the same page.
Yeah.
And it's not too dark. Like it's never too dark. I find
Mhm.
myself, and I also think, like as someone who does a lot, way too much of like overthinking and just introspection, and like, what's the point? Like, why am I here? I think I was put on this planet to like make people smile. And because I just don't have any shame, I don't care. And like, I will do whatever it takes if I can get someone to crack or laugh or smile. Cause I feel like that's the most important thing, is to just spread joy. Like in the midst of all of the terrible governmental garbage, I just am like, nah, let's just play some fun games and like laugh a little bit. And so I always am looking for opportunities. And I think that's just how my brain is, because I've just gotten to that realization after college, really, where it was like, I just don't care what people think of me. So if, standing up in the middle of a park and singing to embarrass my daughter is gonna get, other people to be like, look at that dad embarrassing his daughter. Way to go, dad. Like, I'm gonna do it every time. So my daughter knew growing up that she had no chance of anything. And I've got all the pictures with her dates from homecomings or whatever, where like I'm posing with him, because I'm like, if you're gonna pose with her later, I'm posing with you right now. So deal. And you, okay? Because if I'm having fun, and she eventually got to a point where she was also having fun with it.
Mhm.
She just leaned into it. So like, let's talk about the Audacity and like leaning into the comedy and the sci-fi ness and just the like making your own story. So now that you've been writing this book for a while, did you feel like a renewal with these characters as you were now creating the graphic novel version?
Mm. They are an eternal spring that live in my brain and never, ever leave. They actually even live on my arm. I have a tattoo of them.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
They've changed and they've morphed as I've grown and as I've written their stories. Obviously, they change throughout the stories, but yeah, they're like personal archetypes. So, because I own a spiritual supply store, I study spirituality and religion very, very deeply. And archetypes, especially for like tarot people, archetypes are important, big things. And in Hinduism and in yoga, all the deities are archetypes as well. Um, Santa Claus is an archetype, Superman is an archetype. Like you're making
Mm.
this thing which is entirely what it is, and it's almost a symbol. So to answer your question, maybe, I don't know. Was there a renewal of what these characters were with creating the comic? Um, I think that I would use the word it was an iteration.
Okay.
It's just always reiterating, just like the whole universe, everything is an iteration. Everything is just eternal return, and it picks up some things here and there, and it changes. You'll see because it was 4 years worth of art
Yeah.
that the early pages look very different from the late pages. Actually, the very early pages look like exactly like the late pages because I went back and fixed like a couple of the first
Yeah.
ones because they were so bad. But then there's a quality drop. It goes like blimp, boop. um, but you will see that as they develop, as they come more and more into themselves. Yeah, and it's very exciting. It's just fun. I love drawing them because I always can see them so clearly in my head when I write them. And
Yeah.
I would be writing, I'd be thinking, I wish I could just draw this for you because I could see it so clearly, but I need to somehow make it into prose. That's the most frustrating thing about writing.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't want to be like the Tolkien end of it, where you spend 17 pages describing like a purple flower field.
Right.
But then you also don't want to just be like, it was a purple flower field and leave out, any like size or depth or whatever that add to the story. And so there's
Mhm.
always that delicate balance of finding the in between where it's enough detail, but you aren't like fully hand holding and spoon feeding the reader with like exactly everything all the time.
Mhm.
Like, is do you feel like drawing these characters is as much storytelling for you as it was like writing the novel?
Yeah, it's a different form of storytelling. I'm actually more in my element because I'm a very visual person.
Mm,
So frankly, I feel like even though it's taking longer, drawing, it's the way that I wanted to from the get-go, how I really wanted to share the story. Um, I just didn't have the tools at the time. I was not good enough at art when I started writing the novels. Um, yeah, it's different. It uses two different parts of your brain to do, but it's nice. Yeah, I enjoy it.
it's cool. And
Yeah.
I saw, forgive me if I said it, but the Kickstarter list that you did 500 plus hours in Procreate to create this first graphic novel.
Mhm.
That's insane. That's an insane amount. Like that's a huge number to me because like I love numbers. I'm a math nerd. I grew my grandfather was an engineer. So like I just have that math brain, but I'm
Mhm.
automatically like, okay, 500 hours. That's like at least what, like 17 straight days plus, like that's a crazy amount of time just
Mhm.
in one app. Like was that learning, did you already know Procreate because of the animation, or was it a new app for you, like a new tool for creating this artwork for you that you had to learn and then be able to get to develop these characters?
I knew Procreate already.
Okay.
I'd been using it a little bit in animation. I got better at it as I worked on the comic. It's a really simple app, honestly.
Okay.
Um, I used to draw with Photoshop exclusively, which is a really complex app.
Yeah.
And Procreate is extremely simple compared to it. So I found it very easy. But I did find that I had to move from Procreate. I did the art in Procreate and I did the bubbles in Photoshop
Okay.
because I don't have Illustrator, which is what you're supposed to do the bubbles in. But Photoshop does have a vector feature. So I
Yeah.
can use
Okay.
and it's enough to do the bubbles that I needed to do. So yeah, I had to move everything from Procreate to Photoshop, and I spent the last 2 weeks redoing all of the dialogue bubbles and the whole thing
Oh man.
because I'm better at it now than I was, and I couldn't let it stand with the
Yeah.
poor quality of the original bubbles. So yeah,
I mean,
I'm
there's something to be said about like the personal integrity of having a project like this come out, of like wanting it to be the best possible version, and then taking what you've learned here and applying it forward to the next. Like, do you plan on converting or adapting all of the original, like the four novels of the Audacity that you've got out? Are you going to also do four graphic novels?
I was gonna just do 3.
Okay,
Because the first 3 is like the chaos arc, and then the next 3 is the order arc, for lack of a better term.
sure.
But I was just gonna do the first 3, but then I wrote the 4th book, and the 4th book is like alternate versions of the characters in different realities, and
Okay.
there's a pirate version of the characters, and I can't not draw that. I just
Right. No,
can't.
absolutely.
And so I was actually gonna just do the first book, and then I was like, "Oh, but the second b I can't not draw this one scene with this, like it's an abandoned underground carnival, and there's this giant, like, sandworm. I can't not draw that. I have
No,
to draw that
absolutely.
scene. So I have
And
to draw the entire book."
right. Yeah, that's the only logical course of action that I see. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I also noticed on your site that you've got Bite, which is like a horror. Is that a novel? And are you
Mhm.
going to create that as a graph, as like a comic or like a side tale or a some sort of like somehow incorporate. I'm just a huge horror comic fan, so like anytime I get to see that, especially it feels like a juxtaposition between like they're very lighthearted, fun, comedic characters in a story that go through all of these things. but then you also have a story where they're dealing with like an abandoned carnival and there's still staff that are there. Like it feels like a much different tale for, you know, you to put May and Zan through.
Sci-fi and horror like kiss.
Yeah, they
They
do.
love to kiss. There's a lot of sci-fi that's very horrific because I mean, space is scary, frankly. It's
Mhm.
terrifying if you really think about it.
Yeah.
Um, so I've always loved horror. I just don't I've always loved horror. I feel like horror for me works best in short form. That's why I do short stories.
Okay.
Just like humor, if it goes on too long, if something is like all humor and there's no serious, I get really bored of it.
Yeah.
Vice versa too. If it's all serious and no humor, I get really bored and I start making my own jokes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gandhi. No disrespect, Gandhi.
Mad respect. And also, no, I'm with you. Like the one noteness of things, if you, and it's like music, like if you only ever hear one tone, like as much as I love the Ramones, and I very much do, like I have a very deep love for the Ramones, but I, for some reason, never knew that they had an album that they recorded in Spain, and it's called Loco Live. And I was just listening to it like Friday night on my way to and from a production shoot, and like as much as I love their music, it just like it's a solid block of music. They would end one song and like do a couple guitar riffs and the drummer would count the next song and they'd be right back. Like it was just constant. And I was like, man, I love the Ramones. This is so great. And then after like 7 songs, I was like, I need to breathe. Like it's just the same. Like the drums are the same and the guitars are all angry and the vocals are all there and I need a break. And it like and I love the Ramones, but I needed a break from it. And I mean the same is said with all, like exactly what you said. Like if you don't have some sort of tension release or like mood breaker to separate what you're feeling, and you just try and keep people at a certain level, they're going to drop on their own. And so
Yeah.
instead of like dropping out of the enjoyment of a story or a movie or whatever, like lead them there and then bring them back into it is how I feel. But like that can't be easy, right? Like how do you balance too much comedy versus not enough comedy versus like how do you keep all of those things in mind as you're writing and then taking these characters through all of these just life experiences that you're bringing them through in this book?
It's just intuitive. That's one thing that I haven't analyzed really. I analyze everything.
Yeah.
But my tone, I believe tone is made, tone is kind of decided by who you are.
Okay.
It's like a mirror of your own personality. And so, frankly, the only way that I can make my tone what I want it to be is by making myself what I want myself to be. So my
That's deep.
self-improvement,
Okay.
my self-growth work, my, meditation and, philosophizing that I do is actually what, gels somewhere deep in my psyche and then shows up as tone in my work.
Okay.
So
Man,
it's just intuition.
I am not nearly that deep of a person. I'm just like, I just want to have fun and listen to music and read comics. Can I do that? And then that's whatever that tone is. And you're super deep. I love that. Speaking of philosophy, and because you like Star Trek, so I took a philosophy class in college, and I don't remember anything else about this class, but the one thing that I remember was he put on an episode of Star Trek the original series. I don't remember which one it is. I'm in shame. But one of the guys next to me was like, "Wait, we can watch Star Trek, but we can't watch The Matrix." And my professor, without skipping a beat, was like, "Nerd out, bitch, absolutely," and just like sat back down and played the episode. And I was like, "Oh my god, you're the coolest person I know." It was such like an unapologetic. I was like, I want to be as unapologetic as he is. But when he would talk and give lectures, he would develop this like spit line that I just got so focused on once I noticed it. And every single class, it just developed. And I couldn't, I was like, oh God, is he going to spit? And so I stopped sitting in the front row once I noticed it, because I was like, he's going to spit that on somebody. And I'm not going to be that person. Maybe it's going to be the guy about the Matrix. It's the passion spit thing. Yeah, it was weird, but I love like watching that. I was just like, man, I really do love Star Trek. And now I've gone back. I consider myself a Trekkie. I'm sure Trekkies would disown me because I can't recite anything. I don't know how to speak in Klingon. I like the original series better than Deep Space Nine or The Next Generation or USS Enterprise or Discovery, but I loved Strange New Worlds, especially the crossover event that they had with Lower Decks. Like that was my first exposure to Lower Decks, was that episode. And I was just like, this is so much fun. And so I started watching a couple episodes, and I need to get back to them. Because I just have way too many things on my list. Like, when did that become the thing also, as an aside, that we have like 87 bajillion things on our list and like 7 that we've actually watched? It's like, oh no, that's on my list, I'm getting to it, but like not yet. And I don't know. It comes down for me to time management because I'm terrible at it. But Lower Decks, like what about that show like drew you to it? As because I know you've got it listed as like a if you like Lower Decks, you'll probably like the Audacity. So like what led you to that iteration of Star Trek?
As a lifelong animation fan and as a lifelong Star Trek fan, Star Trek plus I even like the animated Star Trek original series, like the old one. I even like that a lot.
Okay.
But humor and Star Trek, like bringing them together, it's just perfect. It's a perfect combo for me. And I at first I wasn't excited about it at first, and then I watched like within the first 5 minutes, when Mariner takes the batleth and is
Yeah.
like fucking around with a bat. I'm sorry, can I curse? I didn't ask.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't
Okay.
censor people. Yeah. Say what you want to say.
Okay. She's like fucking around with a batleth, and then she just like in the gore, like
Yeah.
within the first 5 minutes, and it was that intense and silly. I just fell in love with Mariner. Oh, ugh.
Yeah.
I can't get through. I love her.
So like with the original series, everybody always feels so like the weight of the galaxy is on their shoulders. And so that's what I liked about Lower Decks, was it showed like this is just a regular job for some people, and like they're just working in the lower decks because that's what they could get, but they're still going to try and have fun while they're at work. And like that aspect of it was so foreign to me, of like, people are having fun that aren't like in the captain's chair. What? Like, for some reason that just hit me absurdly, and I was like, I'm in. I just want to know everything about this. So yeah, I'm definitely
Isn't it great to think about people who are underprivileged, people who don't have a lot of money or a lot of power, enjoying their lives?
It's crazy. Yeah.
Isn't it great? That's why I love Anthony Bourdain. No
Okay.
Reservations.
Yeah.
Because when he goes to places, oftentimes, and this is not across the board, but you will see that the richer, wealthier countries, you see a higher percentage of miserable people
Yeah.
that are just like, they're wealthy, they've got everything they need, but they're just like, in these suits, and they're like eating their like rotten fish, and they're like, yeah, this is a delicacy.
Yeah.
And then you see people who are very, very poor and who are like cooking stuff in old like metal cans over a fire. and they're laughing and they're dancing and they're singing and they're having fun and they're loving each other. I'm like, okay, there's something here. There's something important here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
That's
definitely a
lower decks, I think.
yeah, and it's like a beautiful thing to see, especially like in person when you're struck with like that's why I loved like volunteering at my church's summer camp because similarly like these kids that come in with all of this weight for just those 4 days or whatever are allowed to just be silly and they don't have to worry about their chores and all the stuff that they had at home with their parents or any struggles or whatever. Like they can come and there's still challenges, but like when you're having a giant like jello war food fight thing, like just seeing these kids like let go of all the stupid and just have fun, and like it's a beautiful moment to see. And like seeing shows like Anthony Bourdain's where he would find these like totally secluded places and these people that just have such joy like in who they are and they can't help but like smile and just share it. Like I love stuff like that all the time, which is part of why I love Star Trek anyway, because even though they had a lot of heavy episodes, they also like are constantly showing new perspectives, new cultures, new societies, all of these alien people. But then there's always that similar connection of like, well, everybody loves, everybody can feel, everybody can have joy and experience happiness and all of those things. And like from the, I don't know, philosophical aspect, like that's why I love Star Trek, because it shows all of that stuff. It's not just like, sure, it's about Kirk and Spock and Uhura and all like Bones and all of the people that are making up that cast. But I think it's more so about them exploring the galaxy. And like, that's the fun in it for me. But I don't know. Now you got me like thinking and I'm feeling all introspective and we're talking comics and stuff. So logistically, the Audacity successfully funded, but you said that you're doing that new tool on Kickstarter for the late pledges, right?
Yeah,
How
Kickstarter has a late pledges thing, so you can late pledge. You can still go to the Kickstarter, and since I haven't ordered them and I haven't started shipping yet, you can still pledge. You can still get a copy.
nice. And that's digital or physical, right? That they can do? Like, is that how
Yep,
the pledges work?
digital or physical. And I will be publishing the book on Ingram, which means that for people who don't do publishing, this means that Barnes and Noble, your local Barnes and Noble, can order it. Your local bookstores, if you have a small bookstore, please go to your small bookstores and support small businesses. They can order it for you as well once it's officially published.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
So you'll be able to have your books all over the place.
Yes, wide
Nice.
distribution. Yeah.
I love that. And so, okay, what's the completely shifting gears? Because I just noticed the tapestries that you have hanging. So you're in your shop right now. What all? Tell me about that. Because like you're writing, you're making comics, you're making novels, and also you own a shop and you do lead yoga and meditation and you do tarot card readings. Like, what don't you do at this point?
Math.
Okay, perfect.
That's
Got it.
it. That's the only thing I don't do. I have an
Got it.
accountant.
That's no, you should. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, so tell me about Cosmic Corner. Like how did all that come about?
Um, my dad really inspired me. He had a lot of friends who were woo-woo, as he would say. Technically, they would be part of like the New Age movement, the '90s New Agers, '90s Wiccans was kind of their group. Um, and they were always like I grew up Christian, and I had a fun youth group. We did those fun things and I loved that. And then I went to college and I realized not all churches are like that. That's really
Yeah.
rare and beautiful when it happens. All of my friends had terrible church experiences
Mm.
where, they were punished. They weren't allowed to be gay. My church was totally cool with us being gay. Like it was a cool church. But then I realized, a lot of people didn't have a good Christian experience.
Yeah.
So I started looking at religion really in depth. I started seeking, like, why do people do this? What is the answer? Like, what is the core of all this? Because college is hard and I was miserable and I didn't want to be miserable anymore. So I started my spiritual journey back then. And I realized and I remembered my dad had all these friends who had like metaphysical bookstores and stuff. And he had some friends who were actually Native American, part of the Pueblo tribe out in Arizona area. And they taught me some things when I was a kid too. So I was always kind of in that realm. And I knew that there was the spiritual and there was religious. And I knew
Yeah.
I wanted to be spiritual. So I did some more studying and more deep diving. And I realized there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of information that if people had it, maybe they would be a little happier. Maybe life would be a little
Mm.
bit easier for them. So I started this education center where I wasn't going to tell anyone this is the truth, this is the one God, etc. I was going to say, here are your options.
Mm.
Seek, like, look for yourself, ask questions, find what lights you up, find what makes you happy. If it has nothing to do with spirituality, we have a bunch of like creativity programs too, for like creative writing, art, and we have an open mic night for musicians.
Oh, cool.
We just want people to connect with transcendence, connect with joy, connect with something that makes them light up,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Um, so yeah, that was why we started Cosmic Corner.
Okay.
We sell all the things, all the tools in the, it's a big store out there. So it's crystals, candles, books, tarot cards, incense, herbs, just anything anyone could possibly use to create sacred, safe space that helps remind them of something, I don't know, enlightening. And then this, where I am right now, I'm in our classroom. So this is where I spend most of my days teaching classes, holding book clubs, holding space for people to come. And so I just had a girl who's a college student come in, and she's rediscovering the religion of her ancestors, which was Buddhism.
Mm.
So I was like trying to help her like answer her questions about Buddhism.
That's wild. Man, I bet you like, do you find, and you're in Savannah, Georgia, yeah?
Hmm.
So do you find that like you are you getting a lot of just new people constantly coming in? Do you have like I guess I'm leading to like that feels like a very diverse place to meet new people as the person that runs the shop and runs all those classes. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah. SCAD, the college here, there's always new college students coming in from all
Yeah.
over. So we do get a lot of different people, mainly the young people are interested in like TikTok, Instagram, witchcraft stuff.
Didn't
Um,
know that was a thing.
it's a big thing, and unfortunately, there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of things that I have to kind of be like, okay, you learned this on TikTok. Maybe
Yeah.
consider your sources.
Yeah.
Um, and then we also have a huge group of hoodoo practitioners who are African diaspora, people who have their African traditions mixed with, in hoodoo, it's Christianity. So they're practicing hoodoo. And then we have got a new group of people, and I have actually an Ifa priestess who I'm friends with who comes and teaches Nigerian traditional African religion, the Orisha
Wow.
religions to people. And she has like, she also has all of her own programs and festivals that she does to help people connect with their African roots.
That's awesome. That's a lot,
Yeah.
like that's a really rich, diverse uh community that you're building and that you have built. How long has the shop been there?
We've been in the city since 2018 doing pop-ups. And in 2020, we actually signed the lease on this building.
Perfect.
January 2020, we opened up this huge building, which the lease we could barely afford. And then March 2020, we had to shut down. And we were taking online orders and taking calls and just talking to people online. And we made it somehow.
That's awesome. Good for you. Because a
Yeah.
ton of people didn't, especially like being that new in a new physical location to on top of it all. And so the website for your shop, is that still up and running? How do people find you online?
Shopcosmiccorner.com is our general online. Cosmic Corner Savannah is our local online. But yeah, shopcosmiccorner.com has everything. I'm starting to put our meditations online. There's a Discord page that if you just message Cosmic Corner from the website, and I can add you to the Discord so you can listen into the free meditations that we do. Yeah, that's the main thing for Cosmic.
That's awesome. I love
Mhm.
that you're doing all that. And you said a while ago, like you just started it to have a stream of income. Well, like, yeah, I just published a book. I just started a company, casual things. It's crazy. I'm just like, I don't
When I
understand.
was in elementary school, I would make bracelets and sell them to the other kids. So, like, retail is just how my brain works. My mind says, "You make money by making something and then having someone pay for it." Like, that's just how my brain works.
Got it.
I was
Yeah,
always doing retail.
that's awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, so for like yoga, what's your go-to? This is a weird question, and you can tell I don't do yoga. What's your favorite like yoga position pose to do?
Sukhasana, which is sitting. I'm
Okay.
actually more of a, traditional yogi in that most of my yoga is in the mind.
Okay.
It's not physical. Although I do teach physical hatha yoga asana. I do teach that because if you wanna teach yoga, that's what you have to teach
Yeah.
in this world, because that's what people know yoga as.
Yeah.
Um But when I teach it, I very much will insert yoga philosophy, yoga theory, um, especially and going into like the breath work, that's a little bit easier to bring in. But yeah, it is it's the original pose that was the first asana was just sitting for meditation.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like that. I, as someone that I think of meditation, I'm like, I would never be able to sit still enough long enough to do that. Um, I just like people that get into it and find that that's their thing. I celebrate that, and then I'm also like, I don't think my brain works like that. I don't understand. Um, like for someone who says that, what would you tell me about meditation? Because I feel like if I could just slow myself down sometimes,
Mhm.
that I would be able to like reset or reframe and then have a healthier approach to what I'm doing in my day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. There are many, many kinds of yoga. And there is one that fits every constitution, essentially. And all like the main goal is essentially the main goal is enlightenment. But that's like a big like end of life goal. But one of the big benefits is that you gain that space between stimulus and response. Something happens, space, I do something. You gain that ability or that control over your actions, your thoughts, your responses. This is becoming an adult. It's essentially like gaining that
Yeah.
space in order to make yourself do what you want yourself to do, and breaking those bad habits that you don't want. So as far as meditation goes, um, start with a minute. Start with just recognizing that you have that space. You can meditate anywhere. You can simply go, and just take all of your senses internally, check in within, and then come back. All right, I just meditated like that.
It's just that, see, classic overthinker over here. That's okay. I like that.
It's simple. It can get very complex. I know meditation can get very complex, but it doesn't have to be at all. I always say there's a teacher here, Ken, he teaches on Sundays, and he's been teaching meditation for 30 plus years.
Oh, wow.
I always say that he's good enough of a meditation teacher that he can teach beginners because he teaches it so simple. I'm not good enough yet to teach beginners. I can only teach really advanced because I'm
Yeah.
getting into like Sanskrit terminology and techniques and theory, and people are like, I just want calm.
Yeah. I just want to turn my brain off. Can I do that now, please?
Yeah. And I'm like, no, you have to turn it on to turn it off. And
Yeah.
yeah, the biggest misconception is you have to stop thinking. I would say what you're actually doing is witnessing your thoughts.
Okay.
Flipping it to just being like, oh, this is what I'm thinking. Okay. And watching yourself thinking, or watching yourself watching yourself hearing. That's it.
Okay. So, like, separating, that was one of the things I did some emotional intelligence course thing on like managing anxiety and stress. And they were like, if you talk about, like, oh, I'm feeling anxious right now because of blah, like putting it into, I'm anxious because of, no, I'm thinking of, or feeling about, like framing it almost in like a third person narrative separates you from having to go straight to feeling that emotion. And so is it kind of like that, or is that something totally different?
No, it's related to that.
Okay.
So the third person stepping back saying, I'm feeling anxious because is step number one. Then the next step is simply, I am feeling anxious. So we're distancing then from the past. Forget about the past. What's in the present? Anxious, anxiety. And then you step back again. I am feeling what? What does anxiety feel like? Tense. I'm feeling tense. I'm feeling faint. I'm feeling fluttery. And then step back. I am feeling. Ooh, I am
Mm.
feeling.
I
And
am definitely
then you're stepping it back, and eventually it's just, I am. I am that I am. And that's when you get back to the spiritual element of what it is that
yeah.
awareness. I am that I am that I am. That's all it is.
Hmm. See, you just explained it to a very novice beginner. So great. Cool, cool, cool. I love that.
Any Sanskrit words, I'm so proud of myself. Good
Yeah.
job.
Because I definitely would have been like, I don't know what that means. Now I have more to learn up, and now I'm feeling anxious about learning. Um,
Right.
no, that was great. I love that. It seems like all of these are you working some of this stuff into the stories that you're writing? Like, do these concepts show up for both May and for Zan and for everybody else that lives in the world of the Audacity?
Never intentionally, because that would make it sound like a moral story or something. It would
Mm.
make it weird. I'd never intentionally say like, "Oh, now they sit down and meditate." There's no Sanskrit in the books. Although there are some alien words that are based on Sanskrit words, just because I'm such a nerd. But you'll never know.
Awesome.
um, and I everything that I write just kind of comes out of my own goo. So of course I look back and I'm like, oh, I see where that came from. I see what I was working on when I wrote that.
Yeah.
Um, there are things that I could sit down and analyze my books and write a whole dissertation about how yoga theory is like completely within all the books. I mean, at the end, spoiler alert for everyone, but there's a moment where they just give in, they just give up.
Mm.
And when they, and that's very, very like Taoism is very much about like, okay, just be in the now, go with the flow, stop fighting, and things work out.
That's cool. I love that. I like all of this is a realm that, as someone who grew up Catholic and then was like, "Ugh, religion," and then I was like, oh wait, I can like I went to a church that said like it's not about religion, it's about relationship. And
Mm,
then once I used that framing, then suddenly like everything made sense to me. And so it's just like this, like, why are churches even bothering to teach rules and laws of religion that man made when like all God wants is connection? Like, as a follower, like that's all I hear that he wants from me is like connection with him. And so like once I had that, suddenly everything else was just like, oh, why was I doing any of this nonsense? So like I jokingly will say like, yeah, I'm a recovering Catholic, because like it's all about guilt and shame and all that, like everything is terrible and so are you, and it's because you're terrible that everything is terrible. And like that's just that was my experience. And then in college I was like, what's everything else though? And so like I went into all of that, but then was like, nah, none of this vibes with me. But like there's got to be more to this God thing. And so that was kind of like my full cyclical journey back into like, I'm not chasing a religion, I'm chasing a relationship. And so like all of the other world, like the Hinduism and the Taoism, the Buddhism, like there was a monk, there were two Buddhist monks that took out a booth at GalaxyCon in Columbus, Ohio, and they were just like handing out books for donations. And
mm,
like I really enjoyed talking to him, even though it was like a very soft sales pitch. But like just talking to him as a Christian, and then knowing that like we're different religions, but we're both just like able to share joy with this moment. I walked away and I was like, that was really awesome. Like I would never expect to see two Buddhist monks just like hang, and they were in the full. I don't know any of the names, so I'm not even gonna try. But they like looked like monks, which is what caught my attention, because I was like, who are these dudes? Like, are they cosplaying or something? What is going on? And then I went over and they had like the posters with the different chakras, and I was like, oh, this is like, okay, yeah, no, like let's talk, man. And like he had one of the books that somebody gave me in college, like, hey, this will open up a lot of your mind to what's out there. And I was like, I've read this book. Like I read this in college. And he was like, yeah, do you want to buy it and like give it to someone? And I was like, no, I already have the only book that I need for like religion and stuff. But like I love talking to you, and like you put a smile on my face, and not every vendor here has done that. So I appreciate it. He was like, hey, here to spread joy, man. That's what it's about. And I was just like, you know what? It is. So I high-fived him so I can say that I high-fived a Buddhist monk at a convention. And then we but like it was just a really neat interaction. I love hearing like how other people find what they find. And I just like I know the teachings of the church are like convert everybody, and now we're getting into my baggage, so I apologize. But like that's not my calling. Like I don't feel
mm,
like I'm more of the like meet people where they are, talk to them how they are, as they are, because like we're all the same. Like we're all the same. It doesn't matter. And I love doing the show because it's like we're all just comic people, and well,
mm.
just sometimes eventually, and like you're making comics, so like you're a comic person now, Carmen. I don't know if anybody's told you that or not, but like welcome to the community. um
Yay! I made it.
you officially made it.
Acceptance. Oh, I love acceptance.
But like there's something to be said about that commonality, and I feel like that's more important than like any like beliefs or religious anything, or like political, especially anything, because I'm a political anarchist. I don't think any of it is worthy of anything. And like so I all of this to say, I have really enjoyed this conversation with you, because it's just you have a different perspective than the normal people that I encounter. So thank you for sharing your story and your experiences with me. Logistically, I do have a couple more things, so you're not done yet. But
Okay.
so I've got the Kickstarter link for the Audacity in this episode description, so you can go on. Late pledges are running. Do you have like a hard cutoff for that, or are you just like once we start ordering the books, we're gonna shut it down?
Yeah, once the books are available, At bookstores. I'm going to shut that off and switch it
Okay.
to, you can buy it through my website, carmenloup.com, or any bookstore. So probably mid-March is when that'll be available.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I've also got your Blue Sky linked below so that everybody can find you that way. Which is just, I love that Blue Sky does, like, you can use your website. If I had a website, I would totally do that. But you're at carmenloup.com, which is like the cool, like, it's just so simple. It's so easy to remember. It's your name. Okay, so that's the logistics of that. The other two things, the first is I'm going to take a screenshot to use as our YouTube thumbnail. I do that for a couple reasons, mainly because it makes my life easier, but also, like, you get to pose how you want to pose, and I don't have to worry about finding a picture where we both look perfect, because that never happens for me. I never look perfect. So I'm going to get my keyboard shortcut and I'll count us down and we'll pose and I'll take some shots. So 3, 2, 1. Great. Okay. The last thing is speaking into the commonality of comics people. I talk with a lot of different creators who have very different backgrounds, but all of us just have the similarity of comics, whether it's making, reading, being a fan of, being obsessed with, having it as their whole personality and hobby and all of the things. But everybody has a different background. And that said, I like to just turn the floor and the mic over to my guests before we end, so that if there's anything that you want people to hear from you, it could be about the Audacity books. It could be about why your tattoo is better than my tattoo. The content doesn't matter. It's just that I want you to have a chance to say anything that you want anybody to hear watching this, listening to this later. I want them to hear it from you as you want them to hear it from you. Take it away.
Yeah. You can do whatever you want to do. You really are far more free than you think you are. So try it. If you want to draw, draw. You are the only thing in your own way. If you want to sing, sing. If you want to start a business, start a business. You don't have to have this huge business plan laid out. Just start. That's
Boom.
it.
Man, that's so beautifully succinct. That's way more well put than anything that I could say, because I'm way too wordy. So I'm not going to try and top it. Hang off after I end this. I got logistics for you. But thank you, Carmen, so much for hanging out with me. This has been a really fascinating and interesting and enlightening talk for me. I really appreciated having you on. So thank you so much. Anybody watching this or listening to this, if you got anything out of this, let me know in the comments or on social media at Longboxpunk, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram is where I'm at. When it's in the description, share the show, subscribe and like and all the things and all the stuff. I don't care about any of that stuff. That's not why I do this. I just do it so that I can have cool conversations like we just did with Carmen. Now, what's a good podcast without a good tagline? This is mine. Go do what's good for you, punks, and read some indie comics. We are out of here. Then we end.